Skywalker, you will die. This is not going to go the way you think.
How you doing, guys? We are finally back with another Star Wars versus video. In today's video, we will be pitting Luke Skywalker before his exile against Darth Sidious at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. We will be breaking things down in each category, and we'll do our best to see who ultimately is more powerful. Now, Legends Luke Skywalker versus Legends Darth Sidious is another awesome video I would love to make. I just gotta catch up on my Legends lore a bit. So comment if you'd like to see that. In this video, I'll be using a good amount of speculation, as these specific versions of these characters don't have a lot of screen time. Little tidbit for you guys before the video starts. Palpatine became so powerful at the end of The Rise of Skywalker because he absorbed Rey's force power and Ben's force power. He was able to drain their force power due to their dyad in the Force. To put it into perspective, Rey's midichlorian count is on par with Palpatine's because she is a direct descendant of his. And Ben's is likely a lot higher because George Lucas said Anakin had twice as much potential in the Force as Darth Sidious. And even if Ben only has 1.5 times as many midichlorians as Palpatine, he still has a lot. So Palpatine possibly quadrupled his connection to the Force. I would say tripled, maybe because they both were living afterwards. The thing is, even with all of his years of experience, he only had like 5 minutes to adapt to this surge in power. So he doesn't know how to control it as well as Luke does. Later on, once we get onto the fight, I will be using Sidious basically as a much more powerful version of who he was during the original trilogy and the prequels. Basically, in The Rise of Skywalker, he had all the abilities he had earlier, but he was able to use them more effectively because of his surge in power. Before we get into the different categories, I've noticed many of you are Darksiders who haven't sworn your allegiance to the Sith, so let's change that. Please like this video and subscribe and turn on your notifications. Please check out my other channel as well, and be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications for that channel too. The first category for today is weaponry. Palpatine carries at least one gold-hilted red lightsaber. He's been shown to use 2, but seems to prefer 1. I've come to that conclusion because in his 2 most important duels, he only uses 1 lightsaber. He typically hides them in his sleeves. The problem is, in The Rise of Skywalker, he doesn't seem to have a lightsaber on him. I think in the comics, he might have had a lightsaber on Exegol, but for most of the movie, he couldn't use it because he was decrepit and old. Because he wasn't expecting to use a lightsaber, I don't think he would need one. But I also don't know that he got rid of it. The thing is, he prefers to use the Force over a lightsaber, so I don't know if he does have his lightsaber, but I'm going to assume he had one close enough to the point he could reach it. Because Palpatine is always prepared, and he had vast resources on Exegol, I think he has at least 1, probably 2 lightsabers there. He also had the Force as a weapon, which is its own category later on. He also can use his environment as a weapon by utilizing the Force once again, of course. Luke Skywalker has a standard lightsaber hilt with a green blade. He has a cybernetic hand, which is stronger than a natural one. Luke also has a vast array of force powers at his disposal. He's also good with a blaster, but doesn't carry one at this point in the story. Weaponry goes to Palpatine by a decent margin for having 2 lightsabers. The next category is intelligence and battle IQ. Palpatine is very intelligent. He's been shown to be capable of long and short-term planning. He's able to manipulate those around him very well. His political strategy is near unparalleled in Star Wars. He might not be the best battle strategist though. During the prequels, he's playing both sides and doesn't create battle strategy, so those aren't what I'm going based off of. During the Galactic Civil War, he's able to set up traps for the Rebellion during Return of the Jedi, but they suffer one of their worst losses due to his overconfidence in his plan. Battle strategy-wise, he's proven to be not the best, even with his vast resources. Luke has never been shown to be extraordinarily smart, but he's fairly intelligent. He's able to understand people very well. He's able to use his powers very effectively in battle. He's able to lead well. He fights in many battles as a member of the Rebellion, a general by the end of it, to be more specific. He hasn't carried out any exceptional strategies, but he's able to use what he has to in battle, and he finds many ways to come out on top. A few examples would be how he took down an AT-AT by wrapping its legs with wires to trip them in The Empire Strikes Back. I don't think he came up with this strategy. He did, however, effectively use it. He also is able to use a force projection to distract Kylo Ren and the First Order so the Resistance could escape. He did this knowing it would cost him his life, but he knew his presence would engulf Kylo with rage and provide enough of a distraction for the Resistance to escape. Palpatine wins intelligence by a good margin, and Luke wins battle IQ by a good margin. Now let's talk about their armor. Palpatine wears a standard Sith cloak over some typical Star Wars robes. Luke wears his white Jedi robes with a brown cloak. Armor is going to have to be a draw, as neither opponent has any. Now on to experience and knowledge. Darth Sidious was apprenticed to Darth Plagueis. He learned extensively about lightsaber combat and force powers. He knows much about Sith magic and the less combative nature of the Force as well. He knows much of Sith history, and he even knows of the legendary Sith power Essence Transfer. This means after he is killed, his essence can transfer to another body, and he can live on. Darth Sidious doesn't fight in very many battles. However, he does train for decades with Plagueis. In canon, we don't know what his training was like though. Later on, he fights his apprentice Darth Maul and his apprentice Savage Opress in a 2v1, and beats both while likely holding back for most of, if not all of the fight. Later on, he kills Kit Fisto, Agen Kolar, and Saesee Tiin in seconds, when those Jedi, along with Mace Windu, attempted to arrest him. I think it's worth noting he likely caught them off guard. He then loses to Mace Windu in a duel, but puts up a good fight. He fights Yoda and he loses the lightsaber duel, but the fight ends up being a stalemate. Later on, he easily tortures Luke, who was unarmed before he was betrayed by Vader. Luke Skywalker fights in the Galactic Civil War for 4 years. He trains briefly under Obi-Wan, then learns from Yoda. After that, he is largely self-taught, as he learns from ancient texts and holocrons. He fights Darth Vader multiple times, beating him the last time, even if Vader was probably holding back. Luke confronts the Emperor on the second Death Star. He destroys countless Dark Troopers easily in The Mandalorian. Luke destroys Snoke in a fight. We know this because of his quote from Kylo. Keep this in mind, Snoke was created to be the perfect vessel for Palpatine, and Palps uses gene splicing to create him. We don't know what Force-sensitive blood created Snoke, but he's pretty powerful. He was then trained by Palpatine, not as a Sith though. He isn't as powerful as Sidious Force connection wise, because Sidious couldn't transfer his essence into Snoke without his body failing him. Luke easily defeats the Knights of Ren, including their leader who was a Force user who wielded a lightsaber and went toe-to-toe with one of Luke's students in a duel. He does kind of lose to Kylo when he destroys his temple, but I think Luke was very caught off guard at that moment, and he held back. And it was a very brief fight also. And he was just kind of outsmarted too. He also fights Sith cultists easily. He knows extensive amounts of Jedi history and the Force. He knows a good deal about the Sith as well. Luke is an excellent fighter, no doubt, but he hasn't fought as good of fighters as Palpatine has. Experience and knowledge go to Darth Sidious by a large margin. Let's discuss their Force powers. Darth Sidious has showcased proficiency in almost every canon dark side Force power. He's excellent at Force choking his enemies. We haven't seen him use Force Crush, but those two abilities go hand in hand, so he definitely can use it. He's a master of telekinesis, and was able to throw Senate pods with ease in Revenge of the Sith. He can obviously use Force Push or Pull easily. He's also capable of using Force Telepathy, and has near unparalleled Force Precognition. He can conceal his presence with the Force easily, well enough for his identity as a Sith to go undetected by the Jedi for decades. He was exceptional at Force Augmentation. He was able to move at blinding speeds, while making up for his older age by increasing his strength as well. He hasn't demonstrated Force Stasis, but I wouldn't be shocked if he could use it, because he has many abilities that allow him to manipulate the movement of objects. Basically, if Palpatine is able to throw, choke, lift, crush, and move anything or anyone, I think he could stop most things from moving. He was probably the greatest Sith ever when it came to use of Force Lightning. He shocked the entire Resistance fleet on Exegol, and even when Rey had the power of all the Jedi, she struggled to block the power of Palp's Force Lightning. In the canon comics, he was capable of burning people to ash with his Force Lightning. Though it is worth noting, it would be much more difficult to do this to a Force user, due to their durability. I don't think he can use Tuat's Menace, because I think only Sith can distribute physical energy, like Force Lightning, while only Jedi can absorb it in canon. I could be wrong. Luke Skywalker has used many Force powers. These powers include Force Choke, which he could use very well. While Luke was very skilled at telekinesis and Force pushing things, he didn't pull down a Star Destroyer. That was one of the many stories from the Legends of Luke Skywalker novel, a canon book which had many tall tales and stories of Luke Skywalker, which all were of varying truth. He did, however, easily destroy the brick hut Rey was in during The Last Jedi with a single Force push. Luke was efficient in Force Crush, and he could easily crush a Dark Trooper like a tin can, and he could use Force Precognition by the end of his training on Dagobah. Though I don't think he uses that power too much. He could conceal his Force presence, like Sidious. He regularly used force augmentation in battle, like any other Jedi. He, like Sidious, could likely use force stasis, and he probably knew how to use Tutaminis. We don't see him use it, but with the amount of holocrons in ancient texts he has read, he most likely has learned the ability. I think he can use force telepathy. I just don't know to what degree exactly. We know he can because he sensed Vader's emotions and read Kylo's mind while he slept. Luke also has the power of force projection, which he uses at the end of The Last Jedi very well. He does die after using it, but he was also cut off from the Force for 6 years. This power allows him to project his image wherever he wants to in the galaxy. I do think it's possible and likely he has more Force powers we haven't seen in canon yet. But in this fight, we will have him use powers he has used and powers he likely knows how to use. As I stated earlier, Palpatine had immense power in the Force, nearly unparalleled, but once he absorbed Rey's power and Kylo's, he was on a different level. Luke is a Skywalker. They have the most powerful bloodline in all of Star Wars, period. George and other higher-ups have said Luke has virtually the same potential as Anakin. I think maybe slightly less, which means Anakin, Luke, and Leia have the highest potential of any Star Wars characters. As I also said earlier, Palpatine probably tripled his connection to the Force, and Luke has twice the amount of a connection to the Force as Palpatine originally did. So Force powers go to Darth Sidious by a good-sized margin. Next up, lightsaber skills and styles. This is one of the most fun categories of them all. Darth Sidious mastered all 7 forms of lightsaber combat. He primarily used the 7th form Juyo. Juyo is a very aggressive, offensive-oriented lightsaber form. It's very acrobatic and involves a lot of force augmentation. This form is very unpredictable and intense. The user must draw upon their dark side emotions to fully use it. Juyo demanded its user to constantly utilize the Force. Palpatine was also an excellent practitioner of Jarkai, which was when an individual used 2 lightsabers at once. As we established earlier, he seemed to prefer using one. Sidious kills 3 Jedi Council members in seconds. Sidious contends with Mace Windu and Yoda in a duel. He also defeats Maul and Savage soundly. He is one of the best duelists of his era. In Legends, Luke Skywalker mastered all 7 forms of lightsaber combat and created his own 8th form. Now in canon, we don't know exactly what forms he uses just before his exile. He uses forms 1, 3, 4, and 5 throughout the original trilogy. By the time of his exile, he's likely mastered all 7 forms. This wasn't too crazy of a feat. Syndraulic and every Jedi Battle Master has done this. So had Yoda, and likely most, if not all, Grandmasters before him. Luke was the Grandmaster of the Order and spent decades uncovering Jedi knowledge. So I do believe he mastered all 7 forms of lightsaber combat. He most likely used Form 5 the most, then Form 3, then Form 4, if I had to guess. This is largely going off of The Mandalorian. Form 3, Sorsu, was a defensive-oriented form. The user needed to be calm and focused. It wasn't flashy. It had controlled but calculated movements. It was designed to deflect blaster bolts and parry lightsaber attacks. Form 4 Ataru was an aggressive and acrobatic combat style. Ataru could be used to defend against incoming projectiles, but it was best used in open spaces and attacking. Ataru focused solely on offense and ending the fight as soon as possible. It needed speed and agility and utilized acrobatics such as jumping strikes and somersaults. Form 4 was often needed to be used along with force augmentation, and then it would tire the user greatly, unfortunately. Form 5, the Gem So, focused on defending with strong blocks and parries, then immediately countering with counterattacks and ripostes. It was made for lightsaber on lightsaber combat, not for deflecting blasters, which it did well. Form 5 is a very demanding lightsaber form. Luke defeats Vader and Snoke, and before Ben Solo's turn, he was definitely the best lightsaber duelist in the galaxy. I'm giving both categories to Luke Skywalker by a good margin. He has a more balanced blend of forms than Sidious, although Sidious has displayed more impressive feats of swordsmanship. Now on a physical prowess. Darth Sidious is really old, like about 117 years old. He does have a new body, but it was very broken down over time. When he absorbs Kylo's power and Rey's, he definitely isn't in his physical prime. So, as we established before, he uses force augmentation to increase his speed, strength, durability, etc. He's blindingly quick when dueling. He has a good amount of strength as well. He's very agile, he's fairly durable, and he has a good endurance. Luke Skywalker's 46, just before his exile. So not young, but not a grandpa exactly. He uses Force augmentation as well, but doesn't need to rely on it as much as Sidious does, because of the latter's advanced age. Luke has great endurance, able to last with the best of the best. He also is very durable, as he's able to continue in fights, despite taking heavy hits, like he did with the Wampa on Hoth. He is really strong, and his cybernetic hand helps in this aspect. During his training on Dagobah, his physical strength is put to the test, and he prevails. He is very fast and agile. His quick reflexes are depicted by his expertise in flying. He's also bounds above most of his opponents in fights when it comes to speed. Physical prowess goes to Luke Skywalker by a good margin. How they compare? Palpatine wins 5 categories. Force powers and intelligence he won by a good margin. Weaponry he won by a decent margin. Experience and knowledge he won by a large margin. Luke wins 4 categories. Physical prowess he won by a good margin. Lightsaber skills, lightsaber styles, and battle IQ he won by a good margin, while armor was a draw. Let's set up this fight. We'll take Darth Sidious just before he fights Rey in The Rise of Skywalker and put him up against Luke Skywalker before Ben Solo's conflicting emotions troubled him. This fight will take place on Exegol. Both will don their typical attire, and Luke will use his lightsaber that he created during Episode 6. And Palpatine will have what he likely has on Exegol, a couple of extra lightsabers. In this scenario, Palpatine just threw Rey and Kylo into that trench. Luke walks into the throne room through a portal. Both are fresh and ready to fight. Luke walks slowly through the portal. "Skywalker, you survived," Palpatine said with disgust. "Looks like we're both in for a surprise." "I watched you die," Luke said. "The dark side of the Force holds secrets you Jedi could never dream of." Palpatine said, "Well, I guess I'll have to finish what my father started," Luke said before he ignited his emerald green blade and prepared to fight. "You will try, and you will fail along with your pitiful friends from the Resistance," Palpatine said. He then pulled his lightsaber hilt to him with the Force and ignited it. Its scarlet blade glowed on his face under his dark cloak. He Force screamed and jumped towards Luke, flying through the air like a black and red arrow. Luke blocked the Sith Lord's thrust and parried it. Sidious slid his blade at Luke's legs, back and forth, but Luke was too quick. He jumped over each strike before he backflipped away. Sidious growled and summoned his second lightsaber to his hand, igniting it. He crossed the 2 blades and lunged at Luke, again cackling. Sidious pressed Luke back with a relentless onslaught of strikes. Luke began a blade lock with Sidious. They stared each other down. Luke pushed Sidious back with the strength of his blade. Luke switched to the offensive and went for overhead attacks and quick slashes from the sides. Sidious had a tough time defending against such precision and grace. Luke spun his blade around before attacking Sidious. He easily cut the hilt of the lightsaber in Sidious's left hand. Sidious dropped it now that it was useless. They continued to fight. Sidious went on the attack again, but Luke was too fast. He dodged and ducked under each strike. Sidious jumped and flipped all around Luke, but even his most precise hits were knocked to the side with ease. Sometimes Luke moved so fast all Sidious could see was a green whirlwind of fire surrounding him. Luke struck at Sidious, but Sidious blocked, pushing Luke's blade up. Sidious twirled his blade down and up again and stabbed at Luke. Luke ducked under this, Force pushing the ground beneath Sidious, caving it in. Sidious fell, but quickly returned to his feet. Luke and Sidious both twirled their blades, and just before the blades met, Luke's blade slashed the lightsaber hilt of Darth Sidious, rendering it useless. Luke then effortlessly Force pushed Sidious into his throne. Sidious went flying through the throne. He was in pain and covered in rocks. As Sidious recovered, Luke slowly walked over. Sidious growled in pain from his bruises, and this pain further fueled him. He grabbed Luke with the Force and threw him so far he couldn't see him through the fog. Sidious sighed in relief as he made his way to what he thought might be the dead body of Luke Skywalker. He sensed he was getting closer and said, "You've already lost. Why hide? Face your destiny and die like a true Jedi." Through the fog, he saw Luke igniting his blade. He walked closer and saw Luke's blade glowing in the foggy darkness. They saw each other. Sidious ripped stones from the floor of the temple and threw them at Luke. Luke dodged and ducked under most. He cut some of the stones in half that were too close for comfort, but whether it was through the slicing of his blade or the quickness of his reflexes, Luke managed to avoid each stone. Luke threw some stones back and then said, "My turn." Luke used the Force to lift the ground Sidious stood on. He quickly raised Sidious and the stone he stood on 30 feet in the air. Then he crushed all the stones Sidious stood on with so much strength it turned into dust, and Force pushed him to the ground. As Sidious rose to his feet, Luke lifted all the stones and dust around them at once and threw them at Sidious. Sidious got hit by some dust and rocks at first. Then Sidious used the Force to divert most of the rocks and dust. "Enough!" Sidious yelled as he force-choked Luke and picked him up with the Force. Luke dropped his lightsaber and rose high into the air, grasping at his throat. Sidious released the grip he had on Luke's throat, but he used Force stasis to keep Luke from moving. "Now, you will die the same way your father did," Sidious said as he raised his hands and shot at the most intense Force lightning he could summon. Luke yelled in pain and Sidious cackled. Steam rose from the body of Luke. This was pain he hadn't been close to in almost 30 years. "Finally, I can finish what your pathetic father prevented all those years ago," Sidious said. Luke's eyes began to close as he began to calm. He then thought to himself, and remembered all the pain Sidious caused to billions. He thought of how he manipulated and killed his father. He thought of how he destroyed the Jedi and the Republic. He opened his eyes fully and resisted the Force stasis and sent a shockwave that crushed the statues and poles around them. Luke fell, but caught himself landing on his feet with a hand on the ground too. Luke and Sidious both struggled to regain their footing. Luke stood up first and pulled his lightsaber to him and approached Sidious. When their eyes met, Luke ignited his blade once again, holding it in front of him. "Now, you will experience the full power of the dark side," Sidious said as he shot blazing hot Force lightning at Luke. Luke blocked the Force lightning from Sidious's left hand with his lightsaber while absorbing the lightning coming from his right with his own hand, using Tutaminis. Sidious growled, using all the power available to him, so Luke sent back all the Force lightning shot at him, along with a powerful Force push. Sidious landed hard, but slowly got back up. He looked at Luke, who stood in front of him. Sidious shot Force lightning at Luke, but Luke used Force speed to avoid it. He threw objects at Luke, but Luke would just avoid them. Eventually, Luke stood in front of Sidious, still avoiding each attack. Palpatine growled in anger, and Luke looked up and used the Force to crush the ceiling above them and bring it down on them. "You fool, you'll kill us both," Sidious snarled. "No, just you," Luke replied. Sidious caught the ceiling and dispersed most of the rubble, but some still fell on them, with debris crashing all around them. Sidious watched as Luke multiplied. All the Lukes ran around Sidious, creating a storm of green. Sidious was confused, but he saw the one real Luke approaching him. Sidious shot Force lightning at Luke, which he blocked with his lightsaber. Luke held his lightsaber to the side. His hair blew from the wind that was created by the lightning. Luke, being exhausted and strained, went down to one knee, still defending against the lightning, until he quickly reached out with the Force, pulling the Emperor towards him and stabbing the Sith Lord through the chest. Luke took a hit from the lightning during this move and collapsed along with Sidious. Luke rose to his feet and left. Sidious looked at the falling ceiling as Luke threw it far away. Sidious died and a huge wave of energy released, destroying the ancient Sith shrine. Luke Skywalker wins. But why, you may ask? Well, with Luke being the better duelist, he naturally would have disarmed Sidious eventually. Sidious had overwhelming Force powers, so much so that even Luke struggled to contend with him in a Force battle. But I don't think Sidious was quite powerful enough to kill Luke by Force choking him or any other lethal moves. I think Luke would have kicked out at the last minute. Luke had a few aces up his sleeve. 1, he still had his lightsaber. 2, while he was less than half the age of Sidious, he had more fighting experience. And 3, his power of Force projection. In my original ending for this, Luke projected himself while Palps was knocked down, so Palpatine wouldn't realize it wasn't the real Luke. Then the real Luke crushes the ceiling and stabs Sidious in the chest from behind. But that wasn't very honorable and was un-Luke-like, so I changed it. I think eventually Luke would use his power of Force projection, and that, along with his battle experience and his lightsaber, would get him a victory. In any scenario, I think this fight would be close. I think Luke would win 6 out of 10 times. But I could be wrong, since we don't see much of prime canon Luke Skywalker. Please tell me in the comments what you thought of this video, and who do you guys think would win? Also, comment if you have any video suggestions. I always love to hear what you guys gotta say. If you're still here, check out some of my other videos and my other channel. The link will be in the description. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. Also, turn on your notifications if you haven't, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.